Fox College football analyst Joel Klatt is presented each week by MyBookie.ag. Use code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. That's MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. All right, Joel Klatt joins us now. College football on Fox. You saw him in the Colorado game. Impressive win over Utah this Saturday. Welcome in, Klatt. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks a lot. I mean, in conjunction with BYU getting beaten by Kansas. Now, Colorado's got a pesky Kansas team coming up. Colorado now has become the favorite to win that conference, which I don't know if it'll happen or not. I just hope we don't lose the amount of respect we should be giving Deion Sanders for the fact that in 2 years he took over what he took over and will probably play for a conference championship. That's an astounding. It's one of the greatest turnarounds we have ever seen in college football.
Yeah, I mean, if Cignetti wasn't doing what he's doing at Indiana in 1 year, then we would be falling all over ourselves for what Deion is doing. You know, I don't think people realize, and I think I've given this stat on your show 2 years ago. They were 1-11. Everyone knows that, right? But I don't think they realize the level of bad that Colorado was. The average margin in that year was for Colorado minus 29. Which is staggering, guys. And the 11 losses were by an average of 32. So if you take the one win, that gets it to minus 29. If you're looking for some sort of context, the next worst team in all of college football was Northwestern that year at a minus 13 average margin. So they were double as bad as the next worst team. It's pretty staggering. Obviously, he's transformed that through the transfer portal. They're pretty good, guys. This is not even the same team that we saw earlier this season. The defense is much better, in particular on the front. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're an elite college football team because they're not. But at their top end, they're certainly the best team in the Big 12, which, you know, if they continue to play well, they're going to find themselves in the playoff, which is every time I say that, I almost chuckle. I'm like, that is wild.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and we just played a Deion clip. He was asked about Travis Hunter winning the Heisman Trophy. And my question to you, look, I know I doubted what they would do this year. I thought that they would be bad. I know that you thought that they were going to be maybe not this good, but as good, close to it. But Deion is just, he continues to beat the horse, that the narrative that everybody hates him. And I think people maybe doubted his coaching ability. I think people have come around, but I think people, you know, I think he was a polarizing guy, but I think there's a lot of people that like Deion. I mean, we talked about his talk show on Tubi. You got to be liked somewhat to have a talk show. Why do you think he continues with that narrative, everybody hates me?
I don't know. Ask Kirby Smart. You know, I mean, like, that's what
well, I think people might hate Kirby.
That's such a good point.
I do think
let me steer away from that. There's a lot of landmines in there. I'm going to take a.
I think it's flipped to people have started pulling for Colorado. People that weren't before. I think
people want to see them in the playoff now, especially.
So here's what I think that is, though. To your point, Lance, I think that everything with Deion is just ratcheted up 5 degrees, 10 degrees. So the haters are really loud. But people that love him are also really loud. It's the Deion effect. So he's a polarizing figure. So that means that everyone's going to run. It's almost like politics. They're just going to run in their directions and take hardline stances. And there's very little nuance when giving an opinion about Colorado. They're either the worst, it's the worst run program, this is that, or it's the best thing that we've ever seen, and it's going to revolutionize the sport. And for a long time, there was not the nuance of the middle ground of let's see what he does. Let's see how this comes together. Let's see how this approach actually can work or doesn't work. Can you get 95 players from the transfer portal in 2 years and actually build a team that has some chemistry and culture? And he's done that. So I think that there was polarizing opinions. And let's face it, even from the time he was a player with Tim McCarver, he listened to the ones on the far side that were negative towards him, you know? And even when we talked with him on Friday before the game, he said to us, you know, everybody's been telling me what I can't do my whole life. And I'm like, that's interesting. I was like, because a lot of people give him his flowers for what he can do and allowed him to do that. But I'm not going to tell him that's the wrong mindset because it's working. It's working for him and it's working for his team. And they play like that. When you're at practice, you can feel it. There is a sense of us against the world. And I know that that gets to be a tiresome talking point. And certainly when I hear it from a team like Georgia, which has been so good, I get annoyed, which is why I threw Kirby out there, because he uses this same type of rhetoric. But what Deion is trying to say is that don't let the hatred of the way Deion coaches get in the way of what you think about Travis as a player. I think that that's probably correct because there are a lot of voters out there that are going to look at this and just not like what's going on at Colorado. But let's face it, like what Travis is doing is, well, it's unprecedented in a lot of ways. And I don't think that there's really any argument. Maybe there's some steadfast people out there that just are going to argue for Ashton Genty or something. But Travis is the best college football player in the country. I think that that's a pretty fair and easy statement to make.
Is he the best cornerback you've seen in the last? Like, if he just was playing one side of the football, and I know this makes him special, like over the last decade?
No, not quite. Let's like if he was just playing on one side, one or the other, he would be a finalist for each award. Like if he was just a corner, he'd be a finalist for the Thorpe Award. If he was just a receiver, he'd be a finalist for the Blitnikoff Award. That in and of itself, being the same player, that's staggering. That's staggering. So is he the most dominant corner that I've seen in the last 10 years? No. Is he easily Thorpe Award, level? Yes. There's no question. So like that's pretty great. I do think that he's going to play both ways in the NFL. That's my favorite thing now on game day before the game is to walk around the fields, whether I'm at a Colorado game or not, and I ask every scout their opinion about Travis Hunter. Not about his level of play, but about his future. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And I can tell you, like, most of the guys will say he's going to play both ways. So like get ready because when he goes to the NFL, this is a story that's not going to stop. And I think that and I said this on the broadcast, I think where it's going to land is that he's going to be a corner in the NFL and kind of like the third wide receiver, which is only going to get 30 snaps anyways. Right? In an NFL game, let's say there's 52 snaps, 55 snaps. Because of personnel groups and switching and situation, the third wide receiver only gets about 30 snaps anyways. Well, that's a way to limit Travis's exposure on offense, even though he's a full-time offensive player, as well as play him full-time on the defensive side. I genuinely believe that that's going to be the role that he plays in the National Football League.
Hey, and I'm telling you, if Shedeur had run a better route, he may have been a finalist for the Davey O'Brien, too. He was ready to throw that pass. Nice. He was ready to throw that pass.
You were waiting that whole long answer.
I was.
See it on your eyes. You were like, oh, man, get me to the O'Brien.
Waiting for the pause. And I also, you're worried about Cignetti overshadowing Deion in the same conference just for Big 12 Coach of the Year. You got to throw some flowers to Kenny freaking Dillingham. They're 8-2, and I love Herm Edwards, but Herm had caved that program in a little bit down there, and Dillingham has brought it back.
Yeah, he had to do a pretty extensive cleanup before he started building, and they've been tremendous. I mean, think of the last 2 weeks. They beat Iowa State. They beat no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Kansas for a moment because I'm thinking of this meme where Kansas is the Grim Reaper knocking on doors. It's like Iowa State and then BYU, and then now it's like Colorado.
Right.
Arizona State has gotten better and better and better, and even as their running back, Bo Scadaboo, hasn't been healthy really in the last couple of weeks, even though he played against Kansas State. This is a team that has been very consistent during the course of the year, and they control their own destiny, Arizona State. What I find fascinating is that if you just play it out and you start to think of, like, let's just say, sake of argument, Army beats Notre Dame and they win the American, and ASU wins out and wins the Big 12, there's a chance that ASU is going to play the conference out of the college football playoff because Army with a win over Notre Dame would be the 5th conference champion included. Remember, it's not just the 4 Power Fours and a group of 5 in the language for the college football playoff. It just states the 5 best champions in college football, which means if Boise wins out and Army wins out, there's a good chance that those 2 teams would be ranked higher than Arizona State, who is trying to backload and catch up with those teams. It's just something to pay attention to as we kind of go down the stretch here of the season. It's a pretty wild deal.
Are you saying Klatt's wrong on this?
I'm just saying, watch where Arizona State is in the rankings tomorrow night. It'll be the biggest jump.
Sure.
It'll be the biggest jump in the college football rankings. Arizona State will go from nowhere.
I don't disagree, but
and they'll come in at 19.
If Army beats Notre Dame,
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah. Oh, I understand what you're saying. I just feel like the committee, who, let's be honest, run by the Power Four, but really the Big Ten, the SEC, I think you'll get a very safety net bump from Arizona State tomorrow night.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, 19, 18, from nowhere to 19.
Yeah.
And I think Colorado will be higher than what the AP put them.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Until they lose this week.
Oh, you got Kansas?
They travel to Kansas.
Yeah.
This is the one that, so they go to Kansas. They're going to play that game.
I think they probably do. I mean,
it's a tough game.
Klatt's got a cartoonist knocking on the door with a Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
But even if they lose, they're still, well, I guess that would put Arizona State there.
No. You got a mess now.
Then you get into a big tie of like Iowa State, potentially BYU, Arizona State. Like it gets a little bit messy.
Yeah.
I know that Arizona State controls their own destiny. I know Colorado controls their own destiny. So if those 2 went out, then they would play in Dallas in the Big 12 championship game.
Damn, who had that?
What really is crazy, if it gets really confusing in the Big 12, I think Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz can play in the Big 12 championship.
They're not dead yet.
That's right. And then he's right that he is playing playoff games, meaningful playoff games, which clearly they can just kind of like backtrack. They're going to have like some sort of Thanos glove and snap their fingers, and they go back in time, and they're back in the Big 12. And Eli's like, "What? What do you want from me? We're playing playoff games."
All right, when they came back and took the lead against South Carolina,
I thought of Klatt.
I did too, and I was like, Drinkwitz will be insufferable after this game.
Oh, insufferable.
Yes.
By the way, and this is not a knock against the SEC, but like the constant politicking by the coaches after the games. You don't have to tell us how hard your conference is. We've been talking about it incessantly for years. Like this whole thing, Kirby's sitting there is like, I want the committee to come down and play at Ole Miss. It's like, shut up, dude. Like, we get it. We're going to give you your flowers. You won 2 straight national championships. No one doubts you. No one doubts you. The only reason that we might have a shred of doubt is because you played like crap against Kentucky. I just don't get it. Why is it a thing down there?
I don't know, but I think he's right. Ole Miss would beat the committee by several touchdowns.
Well, clearly, because that committee, I don't know what they're looking at, but it ain't football.
Yeah. You really want to know what it's about? It's about years and years of mainstream media, Hollywood, and the economics post-Civil War. It's really what it's all about. If you want to delve into it.
We're just getting deep into American history. This is deep-seated stuff from Kirby.
Joel Klatt with us. He's joining us each week courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag, where Indiana is a 12-point underdog right now at Ohio State. That is the Fox Big Noon Kick on Saturday, and it's a fascinating game. We, in a lot of ways, do not know what Indiana is. They have whipped everybody they've played, but rightfully everybody's like, yeah, but who have they whipped yet? And you don't get the credit until you beat a team like Ohio State.
It's absolutely true. Indiana and Texas are the only 2 teams in the top 10 that do not have a ranked win. And there doesn't seem to be any question about Texas, and I think rightfully so, based on the way that they played last year and what we think of their roster. And there are massive amounts of questions in regards to Indiana. I think Indiana is better than people want to give them credit for. I don't think it's just a schedule, although they would probably have a loss if they were to have played, like, let's say, Ohio State's schedule, or Oregon's schedule, or certainly Michigan's schedule. The same can be said about the SEC, though. We see the imbalance in some of these conference schedules. I think that if you swapped Texas and Georgia just schedule for schedule, Texas would be the 8-2 team and Georgia would be the 1-loss team, right? So in a lot of ways, Indiana is getting the benefit like Missouri got the benefit in terms of a favorable schedule. I do think, though, that this team, that there are enough really experienced quality players that this experiment is going to catch on. I'm already hearing, guys, and this is what the experiment is if we were to take essentially a first team MAC conference roster, right? Or American roster, like a group of 5, if you just took the first team all conference team and said, what would that group do against, a Big Ten schedule? And you're seeing that they play just fine. Now, do they have the 5 stars? Do they have the elite, like maybe national championship level players? Maybe not. But they have this roster of group of 5 players that are highly experienced, and they've all played all conference caliber football, and they come up there and they can play just fine in that conference. I'm hearing so many coaches start to say to themselves, like, we have designated staff members now scouring the group of 5 for the next Indiana roster. Who's the next Curtis Rourke? Who are the next guys that have played 30, 35, 40 games at that level, have produced at a high level, and now we can bring them up here and they've got a chip on their shoulder. They know how to work. They're veterans, and we can get them for a year or maybe 2. So I think that's what's so fascinating about this. And if they were to beat Ohio State, like, everyone would lose their mind. And I think it would turn college football and the transfer portal on its head. We would no longer look at the transfer portal and say, hey, I want Alabama's backup or Georgia's backup or Ohio State's backup that was a 5-star that didn't get on the field. I want to go to, wherever, Buffalo, and get their all-conference defensive tackle that's played 35 games. And so the value of the transfer portal in a lot of ways is going to be under scrutiny when we get to this game on Saturday in Columbus.
I lean that Ohio State's going to win this game 17-21. They're a 12-point favorite. You've got a feel for these atmospheres, the Big Noon kickoff. I think Indiana is really good. I just think this spot is probably a little too much. How do you think it plays out? And if they were to lose by 21 and still go 11-1, they should be in, right?
I would think so. I mean, who knows the politics, that are going to happen, certainly from guys like Eli. Eli will be down there just pounding the table.
We're better than Indiana.
What's Indiana done? I think it'll be a fascinating experiment because let's just say, sake of argument, Texas beats Texas A&M. And then you've got these 4 2-loss teams in the SEC. You're going to have a big old argument between Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Indiana because Alabama controls their own destiny. So Alabama likely gets to the SEC championship game. I believe if you get to the SEC championship game, even if you lose and that's your 3rd loss, that you should go and not get penalized for that game. I'm in total agreement with Greg Sankey on that. So then those 2 teams would go, and then you would have these 3 2-loss SEC teams against a 1-loss Big Ten team. And, that's going to be a significant argument. With no ranked wins, Indiana is going to be in a perilous position, in particular without a strong brand on the side of their helmet, which I think actually matters a great deal.
It does, but I'm almost okay with Indiana being in, man. I'm okay with the Big Ten and the SEC having a certain number of spots because I believe if in 10 years it'll work itself out that if the 4 best SEC and Big Ten teams are in, I think over a 10-year slice that 4th Big Ten team will deserve to be in there more years than not. Yeah. So I'm okay giving Indiana the benefit of the doubt.
I totally agree with that. I think that the SEC is going to get 5 this year. I think the Big Ten is going to get 4. And what I think is going to happen is that you're in a position where I don't think that there's any way the ACC and the Big 12 get 2. So you're just going to take their champ and leave the loser of that game out, and then probably Notre Dame, and there you go. And that's probably going to be your playoff at that point. I do think that when we get down to it, the argument will be between probably like the loser of the ACC, Tennessee, and Indiana. 2 spots, 3 teams. I think that's the argument at the end of the year.
Joel Klatt is with us, courtesy of mybookie.ag. Code NEXTROUND when you sign on. That doubles your initial deposit. You make your deposit, you use code NEXTROUND. That doubles it. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with mybookie.ag. Question from the audience. Milkman, would like for you to explain your thinking. He says you have said in the past head-to-head has to matter, but you have Georgia, he says, ahead of both Ole Miss and Alabama. Can you explain that thinking?
Yeah, that's first of all, Milkman, like you're exactly right. I've always argued that head-to-head has to matter, but when the way that I ranked my top 10 is I kind of got to 5, then I put Notre Dame at 10, and then I looked at the 4 SEC teams that were all 2-loss teams. And the hard part about that is that if you just try to go by head-to-head, then it's a cycle, right? Because they've all kind of beaten each other. So there's no clean way to just play this out head-to-head. So I had to go to essentially like, well, what would be like a Klatt tiebreaker? What's my tiebreaker? I'm not going to go to winning percentages or anything like that. Guys, here's what I went to. And I talked about this actually on my show that released today. I went to what are these teams at their best? So scrub who they've beaten and who they haven't beaten. I just said like, okay, when I've seen these teams play their best football, I'm going to rank them 1 to 4 based on their best football, their ceiling. I think the highest ceiling of the 4 is Georgia. I think we saw it last week. 4 quarters, well, really 3 quarters of like really dominant football over a good Tennessee team. They won on a 31-7 run in that game. So I went with them at the top. Then Ole Miss dominating that Georgia team. And I know that there was weather involved, but that was highly impressive. The problem with Ole Miss is that their floor was just so much lower than what Georgia's floor was. So I put them next. Bama's best performance was just a half over Georgia, at least in my estimation. I don't think that the LSU performance is carrying as much weight as we thought it would because of what LSU has done. And what they actually are. And then Tennessee, their win over Alabama at home was solid, but it was just by 1 score. And so their top end, to me, didn't raise to the level of the other teams. And then A&M fell out of the top 10. I didn't even have them in that next group of 4 because their best win was a comeback win against LSU, which, let's be honest, doesn't look that great. They still have a loss against Notre Dame, and then they got drilled against South Carolina. So, Milkman, great question. I'm not telling you that that's a bulletproof system, but that's how I ranked those teams. I looked at their ceiling. When they're at their best, who do I think is the best? And so that's how I landed on those 4 in that order.
Fair enough.
Sticking in the SEC, this is a very random question, but I just wonder if you go my direction on this. If you could only draft 1 player from this conference for the years of 25 and 26, so the 2 following years after this season, 1 player from the SEC.
To play in college.
Okay.
Yeah. In college. It would be, why am I blanking his name? It would be, there's 3 guys. There's 3 freshmen. Ryan at Bama.
Yep.
The Simmons rusher at Texas. And the edge, right? Simmons, right? I believe I've got that right. And then there's a freshman edge rusher at South Carolina that I really love.
Well, that's the team I was going to go with. I would go Lenora Sellers. I think he is going to be
the quarterback at South Carolina.
I think he's going to be next level. They're on that 4-game winning streak, 10 touchdowns, only 1 pick, and the guy is just learning. He is so raw. Like Ryan Williams seems like, would be the answer. Before the season, you would have said like Nico or Jackson Arnold. But watching this Sellers kid, I don't know if they can keep him. I assume you pay whatever you got to pay to keep him.
I would hope so. But people are going to be. You talk about the Sharks. They are going to be. They are going to be down there. That's going to be difficult for South Carolina to keep them. I do like Lenore South. That's a good one. That's a really good one. I didn't go with Nico only because I think there's a ceiling on that offensive system. If he stays at Tennessee, there is a ceiling on that system, and you saw it on Saturday night.
Wait, why though? Go back 2 years ago though. Go back to Hendon Hooker, and that offense was
there was
incredible.
A ceiling on that. Did they win the conference?
They did not.
Well, that was kind of Stallions, right?
And they had Hyatt, they had Hooker, like they had elite play. So here's the issue with Tennessee. I'm not saying that they can't be good. I'm not saying that they can't be like really good, but I don't think that they can win a championship with that system. I know that that's an extraordinarily like bold take, but if you go back to even like the Baylor days, this offensive system is predicated on space and athletes. And when the athletes are not significantly better than the competition and you're in a matchup game and you have like athletes on the other side, this offense isn't nearly as explosive as when they're clearly better than the opposition. You see that in the point totals throughout this SEC season this year. Now, a few years ago, they were elite on the outside, elite, but still couldn't win it. And the reason is because they don't have a second pitch. There's not enough balance in the structure of offense that they play. Think about all the great teams that we've seen. They can do a lot of things. And I'm not just saying passing and running. I'm saying that you've got to be able to get big sometimes and throw 2 tight ends in there. You've got to be able to get under center. You've got to be able to roll the pocket. You've got to be able to take quick game. You've got to be able to throw the ball down the field, because at some point in a matchup game, they will take away your best stuff. Someone's going to take away your best stuff, which is exactly what happened on Saturday night to Tennessee, and they've got nowhere to go. They're continuing to stay out wide and spread out and play this whole matchup numbers game, and Georgia took it away because of their speed and physicality. And Tennessee can't adjust. That system can't adjust. It is not flexible enough as a structure of offense to win a championship. Certainly not an SEC championship, and I don't think certainly a national championship. So that's why I didn't say Nico right there.
Quick NFL point. You've watched a ton of Broncos football. Bo Nix. Should be 7-2 over his last 9 games if they didn't have the field goal block, but he's only thrown 2 picks. And he carved up that defense. And I know the Falcons' defense isn't very good, but, man, he's playing with a ton of confidence. What are you seeing right now with Bo Nix?
The most important part of a young quarterback's success in the National Football League is fit. That is it. And the schematic fit between Sean Payton and Bo Nix is remarkably good. That's why, I can remember, I don't know if I said it to you guys. I went on Denver radio last January, right after the college season, and they were like, all right, of these quarterbacks, who you taking for Denver? And I said, Bo Nix. And they were all like, Bo Nix? What are you talking about? That's going to be too high for Bo Nix. And I told them, it's not about which quarterback you think is better. It's which quarterback fits what you want to do. And Bo fits perfectly with Sean Payton. I was actually with Sean for a brief time when he was with the Saints in 2006, his first year there. In that offseason, I was down there in camp with the Saints. So I know the offense fairly well. I know what Oregon was doing very well because Will Stein played for and then coached under my old offensive coordinator. Okay, so there was all these tie-ins back to, I know exactly how Bo Nix had success in college and what he was being taught and how, and I know how Sean Payton, what he wants to do to have success. So that's why he's succeeding, is because his style of play, the way that he succeeds as a point guard, a distributor with a little athleticism, fits perfectly with what Sean Payton wants to do. And they're finally finding that rhythm. That's a pretty darn good team, the Broncos, especially for a team that has a rookie quarterback.
All right, big noon kick, the big one. Indiana going to the Horseshoe. Kurt Cignetti with a new contract, and Ohio State with the same old Buckeyes. We'll see what happens there. Tell Gus he can use that one. Joel Klatt will be on the call 11 o'clock on Fox Central Time, noon Eastern. Thank you very much, Klatt. Have a great week.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.
All right, buddy. Klatt with us, courtesy of MyBookie.ag, code next round. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag to double your initial deposit. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code next round.